Hello, I'm Michelle LeDuc Catlin. Welcome to episode 10 of season 1 of TruedUp, the podcast that invites you to be the change. There's a lot of talk about our rights these days, and rightly so. The speed with which our rights have been taken away, our right to speak our minds, to protest, to choose what goes into our bodies, to travel, to work, to access our money, to even leave our homes was breathtaking, jaw-dropping, mind-blowing, shape-shifting. It left us winded and wondering what happened. It was as if we were in the house with Dorothy and Toto as the tornado swirled us through the air and dropped us in a very strange and different world. We're definitely not in Kansas anymore. Most of us aren't sure exactly where we are, but we find ourselves tiptoeing around the yellow brick road, cautious about every conversation, moving forward but unsure of where this road will take us. One thing I do know, there is no wizard at the end who will save us. This, I believe, is our opportunity, our opening to shift from a society of victims manipulated through fear to one of victors with the power to take responsibility for our own lives. And there are few people I've found who demonstrate or teach this better than Jason Christoff, my guest today on TruedUp. An expert in the ubiquitous usage of mind control, Jason recently testified in the Romanian Parliament and in the U.S. Senate about what has been done to us these past few years. But his main focus is not on politics or changing the system. His focus is on controlling the one thing we can control, ourselves. Through his articles, interviews, podcasts, and powerful courses, Jason turns people's attention to what he calls the 5 pillars of emotional, intellectual, spiritual, physical, and financial strength. Building these is where we can make the biggest difference in our lives. We can learn to see, to discern, to disseminate. We can build resiliency against any attempts to harm us. And just like Dorothy, we can discover that we had the power all along. Here's my conversation with Jason Christoff. There's 1,000 things I could talk to you about, Jason. And I only discovered you about less than a year ago. So for me, this is so exciting. And I'm going to start with kind of our commonality and why I was drawn to you, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Go right ahead, Michelle. Thanks for having me here too.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. So I have a background, an interest in health and wellness. Now, I always did. I was a dancer. I was a cyclist. But then I got very sick and I had chronic fatigue for 13 years. So that was a major focus of my life, was healing. And then for 29 years, I've been involved in personal growth, spiritual growth. And then about 4 years ago, I got interested in the truth and freedom movements. And here you are doing all 3. It was like, who is this person? He's doing it all, and he's doing it successfully, and he's reaching a broad audience. So first of all, wow, bravo, thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm happy you noticed.
I did notice, and this is really why I wanted to sit down with you and have a conversation. Now, I have to say, I used to say that the people I have on the show are the people I want to sit down and have a coffee with. But since you, I no longer have a coffee.
I'm happy about that.
And I did know that it did not have a good impact on my body through my healing process. But why don't we start there? Why don't we start with the coffee thing?
Well, the coffee thing, I just got off a whole other hour interview in the United Kingdom talking about coffee. So it's sort of fresh in my head right now. But what I want people to know is if they need more information about coffee or what's being hidden from them about coffee, they should go to this book called Caffeine Blues, and it's by Cherniske. Maybe you could add that to the notes for the audience members. It's important because in our world today, there's so many things hidden, and we're losing our ability to run the society effectively because we're being poisoned on this very grand scale. And it's not just what happened from 2020 up to now. It's basically, there's things that have been normalized in our society that people think are healthy, but they're not. And sometimes they want a lot of references, and there's more references than anything I could provide in this book called Caffeine Blues by Cherniske. But coffee, the main thing about coffee is that it cuts blood flow to the brain in general by between 40 and 52%. So life is very hard on its own. Life will always give us challenges. Those challenges will just appear a lot more severe if you have half a brain. And this is what, and if you are approaching life with this half a brain concept from drinking the coffee, you'll see that life is very difficult, but it's more difficult than it really needs to be. And not only does it cut blood flow to the overall brain proper by about half, it has this huge dramatic effect on different sections of the brain. So the section of the brain we need to live a successful life is called the prefrontal cortex, or the frontal lobe. It's just behind the forehead, and it's sort of known as the CEO of the neurological operation. It's supposed to check and balance any idea or thought that we make up in other parts of our brain. And it's supposed to put the brakes and really pump the brakes hard on illogical behavior, irrational behavior. And this part of the brain is notorious for also thinking very long term. The prefrontal cortex will think 5, 10, and 15 years down the road. Like, where is this habit going to get me? If I'm watching Netflix 2 hours a night, this part of the brain says, okay, we'll watch 2 hours tonight. But if I watched it 2 hours every night for 15 years, obviously my life would be in a much worse situation than if I didn't watch it at all. So all this logical thought and rational thought really circulates in the prefrontal cortex. When you have coffee or caffeine, and it could be diet pop, regular pop, hot chocolate, green tea, caffeinated teas. There's 2,000 medications with caffeine in it. You get this huge inhibition of the prefrontal cortex. So it means the CEO and this logical and rational thought processor, this long-term thinking apparatus, it's all gone. And then the reason it's gone is because caffeine is what's called an alkaloid poison. The coffee plant is only one plant that produces caffeine. To use it in the same way other plants use caffeine, it kills bugs and it kills competing foliage so that the plant that's producing the caffeine can get closer to the sun. So when you drink coffee, it poisons you. And anytime you're poisoned, you get what activation of what's called the limbic system, or the fight or flight system. And this system is notorious for short-term thinking operations at things like 5, 10, and 15 hours down the road. It's completely illogical. It's emotional based. You see a lot of people making emotional decisions today. They can't control their emotions. So you don't want this part of the brain on too much, but we do. The fight or flight system is a system that's natural in us. Like if a mugger came in the house right now, or a pit bull was chasing you, or you had a big problem in your relationship, this nervous system does have its advantages. It does have its place. It does have its time. But people are activating it by drinking coffee. So you have this very primitive, primal, low IQ, child-based emotional protocol getting activated by the coffee drinking. And if you're doing this every day of your life, this change in brain function can really bring you into the ditch of life, and you're going to think it's normal. You're not going to associate it with what you're putting in your mouth, and that's what makes it really, really dangerous.
Well, there's two things that strike me. First of all, it is my experience that when I'm on coffee, and it is on coffee, I go through about 2 weeks where there's this sense of heightened intellectual capacity, heightened imagination. It's like, wow. And then after about 2 weeks, it starts to have the opposite effect. And I am physically drained by it, and I'm exhausted by it. How do we get, how is it that people think that coffee has only the first part, that coffee is just this thing that wakes them up and makes them think better?
Well, what you're describing is that sort of singular focus that caffeine is known to give you. But what you're really describing is the metabolic protection mechanism I just talked about. When there's a threat, your fight or flight system is activated. The fight or flight system is the protection against basically dying early. This sort of focus, you get really focused on a single thing. So basically, that's part of the mechanism I'm talking about. If there was a pit bull chasing you, your mind is designed when it's in fear to really focus on an escape route or focus on the pit bull. And your brain, this part of the brain can even slow down the attack of the pit bull. And you can, like, it's a very effective. It's not a defect is what I'm trying to say. But that takes a lot of energy out of the system. It takes energy out of you. It's like you're spending money. You're not getting that back. So eventually this change in metabolic function because of caffeine poison to the fight or flight system, it's very heavily dependent. And you will have that singular focus. Writers use caffeine very effectively. They'll have a little espresso and you'll see them, they won't get up, right? They'll typing for 12 hours down at the cafe, and they'll be like, oh, I finished those 2 chapters. But it's very energy intense, this singular focus and this activation of the fight or flight. Just like the way the fight or flight's supposed to work is the zebra gets chased by the lion. There's a huge metabolic change where all the energy of the body's focused in getting the zebra away from the lion, and it's a ton of energy. And then the attack's over, and then the zebra relaxes. This is what you're describing, is you're draining the natural system of its energy. This caffeine related, it's an artificial activation of the fight or flight. It's not supposed to be on every day. It's going to leave you completely depleted of energy in very short order. I mean, I know one guy, a business partner, he couldn't even really talk effectively, even walk effectively. He would get out of bed. I mean, it was such a transformation when he would have his coffee. And I haven't really told him, but I would imagine his imminent death is going to be very premature because he doesn't understand that he just keeps draining his body of the energy it might need to find cancer, to rid itself of cancer, to repair organs that really get damaged over time. He's draining the valuable energy of his body from doing the rest and recuperation and repair, because he's basically lighting this massive ignition fire of his fight or flight system. So people can realize how drained they are if they just take the 1 day of coffee away. You will see them, they will completely re-engage with their natural energy level, which is near zero. So it can become a dangerous cycle.
This is so great because we're talking about something that is so normalized. You were talking about normalized things that are at play, let's say. So yeah. I'd like to talk about, because fundamentally what I'm interested in is why some people see things and others don't, why some people stand up, adhere to their own values and principles and others don't. And your expertise in terms of, and I think it really combines those three categories that I talked about, health and wellness, personal growth, and truth and freedom, is in mind control.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the different, very normal ways that we are being manipulated?
Well, I can answer your first question, maybe why people don't see, and then maybe I can get to why, how we're getting manipulated. But don't forget, you're talking about people who can see the truth or sort of stand up, like you went to the convoy, and there were people there leading truth to power where they were taking action. So the thing is about this infantile part of the brain, it is infantile, and it likes pleasure and it likes comfort. And it's been shown in psychology that you need pain and failure and discomfort to mature to an adult. And the adults have no problem taking it from there to stand up for themselves. So all our society, and it's been normalized where people might think this has always been the case. I will tell you, this has not always been the case, where caffeine actually, part of the fight or flight system and part of how the caffeine works is the way alcohol works, and the way marijuana works is basically when you're going to experience pain, failure, and discomfort, and you consume any one of the sedative substances I just talked about, it reduces the discomfort. It reduces the pain. It reduces the feelings of failure. But like I said, you need all that to mature, and mature adults need to be mature adults to stand up for themselves. So there is a group of people who rule for a living. They know all this plus a lot more. They know, hey, these people, they'll look out from their ivory towers and say, these people below us, they're easier to rule if they stay children. But they can always mature from children to adults if they experience pain, failure, and discomfort. Our job would be to keep them as children. Let's first send in all these substances that interfere with pain response: alcohol, marijuana, sugar, wheat, milk. Things like this interfere with the pain response. These are sedative, tranquilizing substances. So we're getting a lot more people today of adult age, but have never experienced the pain and the failure and discomfort to make the rite of passage from child to adult. And the failures are also taken away. Everybody gets a first place ribbon or a participation ribbon. I remember when I placed, there was 6 people in a race in my public school. I finished 6th, which would be last. And I experienced a massive amount of pain. Now, today, in our fabricated reality, they'd be like, that's bad for the child. No, it's not. Because that helped me feel the immense pain. Instead of sedating to it, I matured. I faced it. I digested it. I absorbed it. And I started with a coach every day, becoming a faster and a faster runner. In the next year, I placed first because of the pain. So you can see that now I'm an empowered human being. I know the cycle. Don't run from pain. Pain can make you better. Pain is there to challenge you. Pain is there to change you from a caterpillar to a butterfly. But in the ruling position, they don't want that. That's why they took away thumbs down for a long time on YouTube. On social media, the thumbs down went. You can't fail a kid anymore in school. Everybody places first and there's safe spaces, even in university. Like, do you feel a bit uncomfortable? A little bit of discomfort? Come in, you're going to give you a safe zone. This is all done purposely. Social engineering, it's called, to produce a society of people of adult age who have never experienced the psychological transition from child to adult. And that's why some people will be adults who act like adults, and a lot of people today, more than any time in human history, of adult age, but do not stand up for themselves. Does that make any sense?
Oh my God, it is maybe the best answer I've heard to that question. I know in your courses, you refer a lot to the adult-child mentality that we have in different areas of life. I think that's so key. I was watching a documentary the other night that talked about the switch after World War II in particular to consumerism, rather than relating to people as citizens, but the government relating to them as consumers. And again, just emphasizing what you said, that focus on pleasure and comfort. And yet, I think we've all experienced that the greatest accomplishments in our lives, whether it's a career or personal or raising a child, have come through a lot of pain and discomfort.
Yeah, and basically that's where all our growth is to be found. It's called the pain teacher. You invite the pain teacher in. This is metaphoric, of course. The pain teacher knocks on the door, and a lot of people slam the door because they don't want to experience the pain or sit down with the pain teacher, and they have a coffee or they have wine after work. Or even if someone's having sort of a midlife crisis, you might have a teacher working in the government school system. Potentially, they're like, I don't feel down. I feel a little blue. I feel a little depressed. And this is how they do it too, the social engineering. And there's various people paid in these systems to execute the social engineering. They'll say, there's something wrong with you. You feel depressed. They're like, yeah, I don't feel good. They're like, okay, something's wrong with you. There's some chemical imbalance in you. There's a malfunction because you're feeling pain. Pain is a goblin. Run away from the pain. Anytime you have pain, it means you're malfunctioning. Pain it doesn't mean it's actually a guardian. Our pain is a guardian. So even in the mainstream areas where someone says, I'm not feeling good, I'm feeling some pain, they're like, take this pill, take this tranquilizer, take this sedative compound. Let's get you back on the treadmill. Let's get you back on the track. Let's get you back on the road inside that life that's depressing you. And we're just going to make sure you don't feel it. And that's what's so dangerous about the social engineering is they're all doing it because if you feel it, you heal it. And if you feel it, it might be you're feeling that your job is meaningless or that it's hurting the children or it's hurting the world. And they don't want you to feel that because they want you to never break out of your mind control programming that I talk about so often. And you asked about the programming, the most simple forms of mind control that are out there today. The most simple forms of mind control is repetition. It's because the mind controllers, the social engineers, know that repetition is counted by a particular part of our brain that works invisibly to protect us. So this invisible part of the brain that works outside our conscious awareness, that's always trying to love us into safer states, is called the subconscious. And its job is to find repetitive content. They know that. We don't. The people ruling us know that. We're never taught about that. So we have an invisible part of the brain that, takes like this pen, and it's always really interested in what's going on outside in the world. And it will record repetitive content off the TV, and off the movie screen, and out of your friend's mouth, and out of the boss's mouth, and out of the magazine advertisement. And it just looks for repetitive content anywhere. But why does it do that? And what does that process of counting repetitive content have to do with your greater security or your greater protection? Well, this part of the brain knows it's safer to be in the group. It's safer to be with the herd. It's safer to go along to get along. And it knows that the most repetitive content wherever you go has to logically reflect what the bigger group is saying, thinking, or doing. So not only does this part of the brain tabulate the most repetitive content of your environment, once it figures out what the repetitive content is, it forces you to act it out. And this is outside your conscious awareness. And I'll give you an example. In 2001, there was a movie called Gone in 60 Seconds with Angelina Jolie and Nicolas Cage. It was a movie about car theft, and it was your typical Hollywood plot. Nicolas Cage had a wayward brother who got in trouble in the the city where they lived, and he got into some big trouble with a local thug. And the Nicolas Cage's brother owed a whole bunch of money, and the local thug heard that his brother was Nicolas Cage, who was a legendary car thief that just got out of prison. So the thug says, okay, here's going to be the deal. I won't kill your brother, Nicolas Cage, if you steal 100 cars from me tonight. Then the contract is broken. Everything will be fine. So Nicolas Cage got to come out of retirement with Angelina Jolie. They got to steal 100 cars. Now, this part of the brain is proven not to know the difference between real time, imagined thought, and what's on the screen. So if you can imagine the audience member sitting in the theater watching Gone in 60 Seconds, this part of the brain doesn't know it's fake. And it's counting the repetitive content. And it's saying to its neurological systems, hey, we're in a new tribe here. We're in a car theft tribe. And hey, this is the most repetitive content. And for me to be safe here, for me to bond with the tribal leadership here, it appears like I have to steal some cars. Now, as odd as that sounds, if you were to interview anybody before they went into theater and said, do you think repetition of any particular behavior on the screen could change the behavior of the audience watching the screen? The average person answering the question to the reporter in the lounge would say, no, that's ridiculous. We're all in charge of our behavior. It's us. We're in control. Here's the problem. The social engineers know that is as far away from reality as psychologically possible. And they want you thinking like that. And when this movie came out in Burnaby, BC, Canada in 2001, car theft went up 70% in the first 4 days after the release of that film. And this isn't the only social contagion that's being, ripped through our society virally based on the repetitive content that's on the screen. Now, the social engineers that rule us have a saying, what's on the screen at noon will be on the street at night. And whatever we want the humans to do, we will flood it on their movie screen, flood it on their TV screen. And this group who does the social engineering will make sure, and they didn't really care about people stealing cars. That's not the main themes they rip through these movies. They do not care. As you're in the movie theater lobby, they don't care if you see Brad Pitt's movie or George Clooney's, Morgan Freeman, Will Smith, Denzel Washington. They don't care because they put the same repetitive messages in all of them. They're going to give you the freedom to choose, but it's not really choice. It's what's called the free dumb program, not the freedom program. The free dumb program is FREE-DUMB, and that's there. Everything that'll make you dumb, any choice that doesn't count, they're going to give you that en masse, like a buffet. So all the messages that make you sort of hurt yourself, become addicted, become powerless, become unhealthy, they riddle through all the movies, all the TV shows, all the magazines, all the newspapers, and through all the educational systems. And this part of the brain doesn't know the difference between any of them. It's counting for repetition all the time. It can see one negative rep on a magazine, another newspaper, and 3 similar reps in a movie, counts all 5 of them in the same category. It's all designed like that, and that's why people are struggling today.
Okay, wow. So the intention, you're saying, is to make us more controllable. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely. Weaker. You're easier to control if you're weaker. It's like why we have chicken farms and cow farms and not lion farms. Like if you're poisoned, you're weaker. I can have my way with you if you're weak.
So why is it that some people are not stealing cars?
Well, basically, their prefrontal cortex would be on for some reason, but most people are drinking alcohol. So instead of, and most people are voting, and most people have gone to college or university thinking, I'll pay for my own brainwashing. This is a good idea. So what we want to do is look at the mass compliance through repetitive content of things that make no sense whatsoever. How many people are sitting with their loved ones and watching actors kill and murder each other on Netflix at night and calling it entertainment? How many are doing that?
So I wanted to talk to you about the entertainment industry because I have been a part of it. And it's been, I have to say that until 2020, 2021, I loved being part of it. I loved storytelling in all different forms. I write, I act, I've directed, and everything kind of got ruined for me when I started seeing some of the manipulation. And I still sort of struggle with. I still love storytelling. I still believe we're storytelling creatures. It's how we pass on information. Mythology is built on, around story. It's not just this happens and this happens. There's a trajectory. The hero takes a journey. They grow. In really good storytelling, they are faced with something very challenging and they grow for the better. That's the best storytelling. Right. So I want to know your thoughts on the place of storytelling and entertainment. Well, let's start with that.
Well, I think, it's very important. There's only one kind of mind control, and this has been an ancient struggle between ancient groups, but you can use mind control to make people more enlightened, stronger, healthier. It's just not being used like that right now. And storytelling challenges, the hero's journey, that's all very important. But say if you were to have a movie like The Equalizer with Denzel Washington, your subconscious mind is just going to watch that one film, but it's also going to notice the same theme in something like the Titanic and also something like Liam Neeson's Taken. The repetition in these stories is the same. Being poor makes you the hero. Being poor makes you walk the noble ground. Being rich, there was a rich man in the Titanic, bad man. Rich man in Equalizer, bad man. Rich guy in Taken, there was two. One was the ex-husband. One was the new husband. Liam Neeson was the ex-husband. And the new rich husband was castrated of his power, couldn't save the daughter, right? Because he's just a rich, fat old man. So what storytelling is great, but the subconscious looks at these stories differently than how you're looking at them. Because don't forget, in The Equalizer, Denzel Washington is so poor, he only has one pair of shoes he cleans with a toothbrush at night, right? And then the pimp that's abusing all the girls in the Denzel Washington's movies, The Equalizer, he's got a big bar, he's really rich, he has a gull wing door Mercedes, and he's just a bad guy. And if you go over to Jack Dawson in the Titanic, he didn't even have to buy the ticket to get on the Titanic. He got to bypass all that dirty money entirely. He won the ticket in a poker game. He's just got his backpack and, little bag. That's all his belongings. And they're lifting the nice car into the loading area of the rich people. And these themes are extremely orchestrated. They're extremely destructive to give the subconscious pathway, the repetitive content that being wealthy and abundant is a bad thing, and that you walk the higher moral ground and you're a more spiritual person if you're dirt poor. And that's only one of the major themes toward men in general. These things are all toward men, is that once men are disempowered from a society in terms of their physical strength or their ability to bring home and protect their loved ones, the entire society collapses. And that's what we're seeing today. And the people who are organizing this social engineering, and I just mentioned one facet, one repetitive theme that's through many movies. Again, they don't care which one you see. The themes will be consistent through them all. They just change the stars and the scenarios and the scripts so that you think they're different. But this is just one theme that's designed to crumble sort of the society that we would once thrive in, we would be happy in, we would invent in, we would innovate in. And this is the danger of not understanding mind control at its very foundation, is that you can be in it, you can be under it, and you won't even see it.
How do we shift that? How do we have people become aware that we are being manipulated?
Well, the first thing you got to do is become healthy, because the part of the mind that can see the repetitive content and recognize it and document it as it's flying around is the prefrontal cortex. So again, the social engineers are aware of this. This isn't like some big secret that they would want to lean in on and hear and say, oh yeah, that's right. No, they know that. That's why all these substances that shut down the prefrontal cortex are riddled throughout our society. Marijuana shuts down the prefrontal cortex. Alcohol shuts down the prefrontal cortex. Caffeine, junk food, and all chemicals. So the average person's getting up with coffee. They got the Axe body spray, the Dove lotion, the body wash, chemical, caffeine. They'll have chemical-laced sub from Subway for lunch, chemicals again, wine at night. And this all activates the fight or flight system, because the fight or flight system is based on you dying early. If you stick poisons in your mouth, you're going to activate the fight or flight, because the body recognizes toxins as a way to die early. And then the person might have all those toxins in their body. They're already in the fight or flight. And then they watch Vampire Diaries on Netflix, where there's vampires biting each other's heads off. And so they're always in the fight or flight, which means they're always out of the prefrontal cortex. So they're never going to see any of it. And that's part of the social engineering. Not only mind control them to do all this stuff, mind control them to watch death-centric things, mind control them to use their mouth as a garbage compactor, which changes the brain function so they'll never see what you're doing to them, even though you're doing it in plain sight. And the trick is the average person's doing it to themselves. So you can see how elaborate the con job is. You take the average person who believes, I'm too smart to be mind controlled, which is exactly what they want you to think as they're destroying themselves. And if you would tell them, do you realize someone's tricked you to destroy yourself, destroy your family, destroy your community? They would be like, no way, I'm much smarter than that. I went to Queens, I went to McGill, I got a degree. That's for the dumb people. And it's been proven it's easier to mind control someone in the higher education echelons than it is to mind control someone down at the bottom.
Well, I think that's one of the gifts of the last 4 years, is we saw some of the most educated people in the world not see the obvious, and we had truckers pointed out to us. You know,
absolutely. And because they have natural brain function. And that's the thing, the truckers could have been caffeinated and alkalized too, but they had a harder life with more discomforts and more pain and a lot of failures. And it even morphed them into adults. Even if they're on the sedative substances, the adult will always stick up for themselves in most cases. And the average person, like some of my friends graduated from Harvard, they haven't had a painful day in their life. And of course, they were the first to queue up in the lines from 2020 to 2024 with, many detrimental effects to their bodies and their families. And it was like shooting fish in a barrel, because people in this sort of ambush that happened in 2020, it's not just in 2020, because the people who organized 2020 knew what was going on for decades. I mean, you just don't launch an operation like this on day one. Like if you even go back to 2011 with the release of Contagion with Lawrence Fishburne and Matt Damon, this was a documentary of what happened in 2020. So they were sprinkling in purposely throughout for 20 years before 2020, sprinkling in the scripts that the average person would act out themselves. It's called dormant programming. So if you go back to Contagion with Lawrence Fishburne and Matt Damon, the airports were closed. The gyms were closed. People had masks on. Lawrence Fishburne was talking about social distancing. And then the person would watch it in 2011, and the subconscious would be what it does. The subconscious remembers every millisecond of your entire life from the last trimester to the day you're listening to this. So it wrote down everything that was in Contagion, everything. So in 2020, when they said X, Y, and Z is happening, your subconscious raised its hand like a child that needed to pee in grade 3. I know the answer. Well, where did the subconscious get the answer that it knows what to do in such an emergency? Well, from all those movies that came out for 20 years prior. Oh, masking. Oh, social distance. Well, how did they know all that? Why did it feel so comfortable? Why was there a sense of security? Because what about movies like World War Z with Brad Pitt? What about Dustin Hoffman in my day with Outbreak? What about I Am Legend with Will Smith? Do we even know that there was 400 movies in that genre put out over the last 30 years alone? And you only need to watch one of them to get the repetitive content, to think that you have your PhD in virology from TV University, that you're an expert.
One of the things I've realized is, or I think I'm continuing to realize, is how much of my worldview has been shaped by TV and films, especially when you have films that are based on some historical character or something that happened, and then you begin to relate to it like that actually happened, or that's the actual person. So I think there are ways to begin to see this. How do you show people how to begin to see this?
Well, in my courses, I would always start with basic mind control that's on a stage. Like, I use this, people could look this up right now. Say they go to YouTube right now and they would punch in America's Got Talent, semifinal, Max Major. So America's Got Talent, semifinal, Max Major. Now, Max Major is a mind control expert, and he knows exactly what I've already talked about, that I've educated upon already, that there's this weird part of the brain called the subconscious. We're not in control of it. It looks for repetitive content. Now, he's coming out to do a major mind hack, and he's going to mind hack Howie Mandel. This is a live. You better get this right. And this is how predictable this part of the brain is, because it's the most studied aspect of science in the entire world is manipulative psychology. It has the most citations of anything else in the research realm ever. So Max Major knows how he has the same brain everybody else has. There's a studio audience there as well. They'll have the same brain. So Max Major records sort of an introduction before he comes live on the stage. And the introduction is only 2 minutes long. It's him walking on a Hollywood backdrop. I guess that's where they filmed it. But see, when he filmed this, he put a symbol over here on the wall. And then he put a symbol over here on a different wall. And then he walked down the backdrop and put a symbol here on a bench and another one over here. And they're not on his physical body. They're on the background. But he knows the subconscious is looking at everything and looking again for repetitive content. And he made every one of those symbols the same within reason. Not so that you could pick it up, but he knew the subconscious is going to bite in hard to this. So he comes out after rolling the video. The audience saw it, and all the judges saw it. And I'll just focus on this one facet. There's another hack in there that I can explain, but I'm not going to explain because it would take too long. But basically, he said, okay, Howie, I want you to close your eyes and picture you're walking on a road. I want you to picture a billboard in the background. I want you to see a picture on the billboard. Do you see the picture? He says, absolutely. So you have a picture in your mind, Howie Mandel. He says, absolutely. He says, I want you to open your eyes and I want you to draw it. So Howie draws it. And he says, Howie, I want you to turn it over. So Howie drew this first, turned it over. He didn't let any of the other judges see it, even though the other judges wanted to pry in and see what he drew. And Max Major says, no, not even you guys. You guys can't see what Howie drew. So Max Major on the stage live had a closed envelope that he sealed 3 hours before the show, and it was there the whole time he was talking to Howie. Still closed. And then he goes over and grabs it, unseals it, and he goes, Howie, did you draw anything like this? And Howie's like, holy crap. He goes, Howie, turn over your picture. And it was exactly what Max Major had drew 3 hours before. How did he do that? It's because Howie Mandel has the same brain as everybody else. It was counting the repetitive content that was in that 2-minute pre-video walk and talk. And he drew the repetitive image, which was the sun. And he said, hold on, because he actually asked the audience as well to draw pictures and turn them over before he asked Howie to draw his and turn it over. And he says, audience, turn over your pictures. They all drew the sun. All of them, 300 of them.
When I saw that, it's stunning because we do think that we're unique, that we think differently, or we're smarter than that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet,
perfect for mind control. Perfect. Because they want you to be like that. That's why they give you the A's and the A pluses and control your content inside the school system as well. So you're the smartest person. You want center stage. You know what's going on. No one else does. In mind control, that's the perfect victim. And that's why so many people fell for what happened in 2020.
How is it you came to this path?
It's an obscure path. I used to own a small chain of fitness clubs. I used to be a high-end health coach in one of the first fitness club I ever opened. And once I became certified by the best health institute in the world, really Real Health, not Canada Food Guide, USDA Food Pyramid, Real Health. And I would coach people to get healthy. I would see them want to lose 30 pounds and they would lose 10. And then that was it. They would go back and they'd plow themselves with a cake, drunk again. It was all the excuses. So they would go back, they would lose 10, they need to lose 30, they'd rip back to, they gained back 5 of their 10, and then they quit. And they were all like that, scared to death to be healthy, scared to death to be, better than the average. Well, it's group pressure, right? Because if everybody's overweight, it's dangerous to be thin. If everybody's poor, it's dangerous to be wealthy. If everybody's queuing up to get the medicine, it's dangerous to speak against it. It's all about group pressure. So I phoned my institute where I got certified and I said, my clients are paying me thousands of dollars here, and they're terrified to be healthy. What's going on here? And they said, well, they have these mind viruses based on repetitive content and the subconscious mind control. I said, what's that? Because I said, I'm tired of taking their money, and it looks bad on me. They're basically walking around saying Jason's my trainer, and they're just as overweight as they were 3 months ago. I said, it looks terrible on me. I got to get to the bottom of this. And they said, well, you're going to have to investigate mind control and propaganda and brainwashing and keep going. I said, all right. And so I started investigating. I started using the simple mind control tactics on my clients. And I used simple explanations to explain why they couldn't get in shape. And then they would get in shape on their own. They didn't need me to meet them there.
Just by pointing it out.
Just by pointing it out and say, this is why. Half of them would get in shape just saying, this is why you're terrified to be thin, because everybody else is overweight.
Because I'm sure that people listening, I mean, I can hear myself in what you're saying, and I'm sure everybody has some aspect of their life where they have stopped themselves and can relate to this. So the first thing is just being aware of it.
Yeah, you got to be aware of it and know that most of your life, when you're going to look at it, you're going to find these things that are disempowering. Now, they're disempowering because of the repetitive content, group psychology that they pile on you through all the movies. But the thing is, your body or mind can go in the other direction. You can also trick it to believe, like if you control your own repetitive content, you can trick it to believe anything's the bigger herd. You could trick it to think that you live in a land of millionaires and you're the poorest person. So the subconscious will be like, you got to get rich. Here's a good idea. I'll make it for you when you're sleeping. And as soon as you get up, you're like, oh, look at that idea. I'm so smart. I made that up. You didn't make it up at all. Your subconscious made it up because it thought you were so poor that you're in jeopardy. You're outside the herd. It gave you a good idea and make sure you're rich. But how would you trick it to make a good business idea so that you be richer? Well, you just listen to Anthony Robbins every day on the radio. When you're cleaning the house, you'll put on some more motivational, financial abundance background noise, and you just flood. All you got to do is flood your environment with the goal that you want. You don't want to be rich? Great. You want better relationship? Well, flood your environment with that content. But if you flood your environment, which is what you hear and what you see and what you think, with better relationship content, but you watch Bad Moms 1, 2, and 3 at night, nothing's going to happen because you're filling a hole and digging a hole. You got to take away the negative content and upregulate the positive, which means you're going to have to take the rite of passage, because if you downregulate slave-based content and upregulate adult empowerment content, you're not going to really fit in with too many people anymore. And that might make you feel you have to make the transition from child to adult finally. And it's all included, like you said, health, psychology, because for you to, you got to feel your pain. So if you're scared because you're making $1 million a year and all your friends are struggling at 80, you got to feel that pain and deal with it and morph into an adult and say, that's completely okay. No problem. You got to stop drinking the wine at night, stop plowing your face with junk food. Most people today, they'll go home on a Friday night from working a job for 5 days that they don't enjoy. And then they'll order food that would choke a maggot from takeout. And this is their life. And this is because it's normalized.
So you personally had some struggles. You talk very openly about your addictions. So first, maybe you could just talk a little bit about that and how you made that transition, how you became an adult in those areas.
Well, I basically, I was in the exact cycle I'm describing. I was leading a very empty, meaningless, and shallow existence. I didn't want to feel it. So I was cocaine. I used a lot of cocaine. I would use steroids to make myself feel safer. I would always feel unsafe. And I didn't want to feel that pain. I didn't want to do anything about feeling unsafe psychologically. It was easier to pump the steroids. And it's what's called a spiritual bypass. If I really wanted a nice toned body, I got to actually face pain eating, I got to eat a little less, go to bed on time, but that takes discipline. Discipline is another form of pain that leads to growth. I don't want to do anything, so I just inject some steroids into myself. always with the spiritual bypass. I drink alcohol. And for me, I was just trying to dull. I realized that I was so in pain and so interested in dulling my pain that I was going to die. There was a point where I was doing so much cocaine and the cocaine was coming out of my nose. I said to myself, I've watched enough movies that I'm probably a couple lines away from death right now. And then I said to myself, there's got to be a better way. What if you don't really want to live? Why don't you, if you're kind of trying to kill yourself, this is the deal I made with myself, and eventually broke that contract and made another deal. But the original deal was, if you're trying to kill yourself with booze, cocaine, alcohol is booze, junk food, staying up late and being an idiot overall, why don't you just quit it all and then try to work yourself to death to become a better person? You can still have your death-centric view, but why don't you try and be better? And I said, well, that's as good a deal as I'm going to get, I guess. So I quit almost everything immediately and started working at becoming a better person in a death-centric way with no balance whatsoever. 15 hours a day, watching every documentary ever made on any subject ever in the truth movement. I've been doing this for 25 years. People always say, how do you know so many things about so many things? I said, because I tried to kill myself in the opposite direction. I've only reeled that back in the last 4 years.
So everybody else is kind of like diving in and you're kind of getting out of the pool.
I'm like, yeah, I swam around the world, and people are like, yeah, I'm jumping in. I've been awake. I'm like, from when? I'm like, 2020 woke me up. I'm like, good for you. I'm going to retire soon.
Well, maybe that's why you're training so many coaches.
Yeah, well, I'm training a lot of coaches, and I know everything about microwaves and mammograms and Tylenol and IV drips and ultrasounds. I know enough about everything to know my aperture is wide, and this is why. So I said to myself eventually, okay, you know a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff, but you can't teach it all. Narrow it down to the most important aspect of truth, which can get the most coverage in the shortest amount of time with the most impact, that impacts your life the least. It makes people's lives better in the shortest amount of time. I said it's mind control. Because everything that I just mentioned, when a woman goes for a mammogram, when a woman goes for an ultrasound, people don't know they're bad. They're not good for you whatsoever. And if you don't know, email me at info@jchristoff.com, and I'll tell you, I'll give you the videos, I'll give you all the research, and you can start your journey that I started 25 years ago. But everything I just talked about, people thinking school makes them smart, poison is medicine, it's good to spray poison on the food because it's for the bugs. Anybody who believes any of that liarrhea, they believe it because of mind control. If you understand mind control, you can clear the slate in a couple weeks. And then you can start reprogramming, because there's only one form of mind control. They're using it to make you a human mess. I'll teach you how to make yourself a human success. Same technology, because there's only one form of it. And that's why I do mind control. That's why I went to the U.S. Senate just 4 weeks ago. It was with Senator Ron Johnson, giving testimony in the U.S. Senate in the Kennedy Caucus Room in Washington, D.C. on mind control. I was invited to the Romanian Parliament at the Palace of the Parliament in Bucharest. Same thing. Given testimony on mind control. It'll have the most impact in the shortest amount of time. And you can protect yourself, because you better protect yourself, or you're going to be queuing up for everything that's designed to destroy you. And then you'll be confused. Oh, there's something wrong with me. Nothing's wrong with you. Poison doesn't make you healthier. That's the way your body's designed. If you're queuing up for poison, of course you're going to have a shitty life. I'm really sorry you were tricked into it. You better realize the functionality and the structure of that trickery, or they'll trick you into the next thing tomorrow. That's why it's really important.
My head's exploding. It says, again, I seem to have more questions. There are two major things you just talked about that I want to address. One is that so you shifted the trajectory of your own life. So you are the example, which is amazing. And I think everybody can relate to what you're saying, because we all have those places. It may not be all of them, but we all have at least one. I certainly have several of them. How is it that you face the things you face in the face of your own fears? Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I was probably more afraid to die than I was afraid to change at that point. So it was sort of a fear of death. So very self-centric, egocentric, didn't want to die. So now I do what I do because I'm the fear that drives me now is the fear of people hurting their kids with poison. So that's my biggest fear. Fear always drives me. I can't seem to turn that off. People say, you got to be powered by love. And I'm like, no, I'm sort of powered by hate or fear, because, that's repetitive content of my environment. I used to live in a very scary environment as well. So I don't know what your question was, but I hope that helps some people.
Yeah, it does. And it points to a couple of things. So one, the idea of, I think people think that there are people out there who are speaking out, who stand up for what they believe in, that they are fearless. But in fact, you're talking about being driven by your fears. So you have the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a prioritized fear list. So when I'm going to, say, the U.S. Senate, and I got, Del Bigtree and Laura Logan on this side, and Rodney Palmer, and just basically people you would watch on the internet. Mm-hmm. And so I got to get up there, and there's 30 cameras, and you're in the U.S. Senate, and you're being recorded in 35 different who knows where the cameras are going. It's fear-based. I'll let you know. You're like, I would rather be in the audience with my camera filming everybody else. But I got invited to speak there, and I applied to speak there. And I'm like, when I applied, out of the 50 speakers, only 22 got to speak. And so I applied, but when I'm applying, it's still fear-based. I'm like, oh shit, I'll probably get picked if I write a really good application. So I wrote a great application, and they said, oh, you've been picked. Are you? Congratulations. I'm like, oh crap, more fear. So basically, but my biggest fear is people having unnecessary pain, like kids in wheelchairs because their parents poisoned them. We're tricked to queue them up for the poisoning. That's my biggest fear. So I'm like, I'm not going to back down. My biggest fear is what drives me. So I'm not going to let all these other small fears move me away from addressing my biggest fear.
Okay, so you have a much bigger context always present.
Always about, what's the worst thing that could happen here? The worst thing that could happen is that, this, whether it's pesticides on food, people don't know mammograms are proven to cause breast cancer. They don't know that. And if you think that's a big claim, go into an alternate website called BitChute and put in the Promise documentary mammograms. And you'll see there's a whole documentary on mammograms called The Promise is the documentary. My biggest fear is this becomes almost mandated. So you have to poison yourself to fit in. You got to poison yourself. And all this is based on very old religious beliefs, good versus evil. And people have lost their ability, right? They've not only lost control of their prefrontal cortex, it's the prefrontal cortex they said, where does morality live in the human being? It lives in the prefrontal cortex right near what they call the temple, like the temple of God, right here. And around here is the morality. So we're losing our morality. We can't see good from evil anymore because we're getting tricked to use our face as garbage compactors, which shuts down our prefrontal cortex where the morality lives. And evil or darkness or whatever you want to call us knows all this. And we're getting lit up in the biggest ambush that I've ever seen in my lifetime. And we really got to back out of this really, really, really quickly. So don't let fear hold you back. Let fear drive you.
How do you have a unique ability to speak to a very broad audience. So I know, in listening to you speak in the Senate, you're not speaking the way you might speak on a show that's on BitChute.
No.
So how do you do that? Because this is one of the things that I struggle with, because I want people to stand up for what they believe in. I want people to true themselves up to their own values, their own principles. I want them to step over their fears, to recognize that all of us have fear, that we are ordinary people. You're an ordinary person who is actually driven by their fear. And I feel like we've become so segregated and so polarized. I mean, that's not news, but you seem to be able to speak to a very broad spectrum. How do you do that?
Well, I know the techniques that, first of all, I went to a private school that groomed people for the spotlight. It was a very abusive school. I did not like it. It was full of Catholic priests that would do very dangerous and abusive things to the children. It was run by fear, for sure, absolutely. But that school has produced some of Canada's top leaders. We were groomed to be the mind controllers of the masses in the dark way. So I know the power of impression, first impressions, ties, colors of suits, how to hold yourself. We used to do public speaking contests, debate contests in the school, which are not in other schools. And they wanted this school to produce the next leaders of Pied Pipers, which it has. Many of my friends are, various addicted Pied Pipers throughout Canada. I'm not going to mention their names. They're big household names, but they work for the darkness. So I just said, this is when the devil really got upset with me. So I'm going to take everything I know and I'm going to change teams. And they're like, Jason, no, you're such a good player on our softball team. We really don't want you on God's team using all the trickery that we've taught you over this time. I said, I'm really sorry, but I'm changing teams. So I know all the tricks that you need to sort of publicly speak and get people's impression. And I've used all that stuff, just the same thing as mind control. Instead of using it for bad, I'm trying to use it for good. And my focus, I've told people every day for 25 years, is I'm here as sort of a spiritual entity in the Jason Christoff meat suit to protect children, the defenseless, the innocent, seniors, and the disabled, and more importantly, the females as well. And that's my role as the cosmic male force acting through Jason Christoff. So that's why I do what I do. And yes, and I try to use every talent I have to try and get that message across, because it does break my heart when I go to, say, my daughter's school, when she was in public school, and I'd see they're putting a new wheelchair ramp up, and I see the kids go by, and I know what's caused the majority of their crippling. I know, I've done the research, I know. So it's very important to me to use every bit of information, every talent I have to try and keep the light alive and keep the darkness away from the defenseless and the innocent.
So first, I'm very proud to be on your team. And for those who don't know, I'm in your coaching certification program, and it is just the most fascinating and easy.
It's very easy when I make it easy, yes.
It's amazing. But it's just so interesting. It actually makes learning fun. Like, it's not a slog at all. It's something I enjoy doing. I want to ask you, what question have you always wanted to be asked and haven't been asked?
Oh, I've been asked tons of questions, but I've never wanted anybody. I mean, I don't really have an answer in that category. I've never wanted anybody to ask me any particular question. I've only been caught off guard by one question in my entire life, which was at the Senate that day. But I completely stepped around it like a politician would step around it and started talking about something else because, you don't want to, you got to be careful about going to the very top and collapsing what you built, not what you built, but the message is getting out. The message getting out over that whole roundtable was the current medicine is not good. And that's the message that I think that's the best we're going to get at the moment. So I wasn't going to collapse that message. So I stepped around that for sure.
I will put a link to your.
Yeah. You know what, Michelle? I haven't even watched that because I don't know. I've never watched that Senate hearing. Yeah.
I watched it, and when you were asked that question, I was like,
everybody, someone said, Dr. Malone leaned in and said, "Oh God, do not ask him that." So no, I mean, because people believe different things, and that's not the point. The point is, let's address what happened in the 4 years. That's where most people. I know you can't bring people up too many levels too fast. So I'm up really high, even higher than a lot of people on that round table. But I'm not going to give all my information because awakening is a process. You can't, you have to experience it. You can't be taught it. So, when you're far up the ladder, you just have to wait for everybody else to come up to you. You can give them a hand, but you can't pull them all the way up because it's too much for them to handle.
That's, I just hear so much compassion in that. And I see it missing because you've got all these people who are fire hosing people with information and talking down to them or acting like they're stupid for not knowing certain things. But each of us has to come to the truth in our own way, in our own time.
It's the only way to do it. I mean, there's no other way really to keep evolving. And yeah, there's some attacks here and there, and people just have to be patient. I always say, I don't know how much time we have. I mean, it's not 1990. You don't have 35 years to put this stuff together like I did. But people will have to go at their own speed, and we just hope to God that it'll be enough. But I'm seeing that it is enough. People are starting to put this together, and I'm hopeful. It's going to be a race to the finish line. It'll be exciting. Who's going to cross first, the devil or God? I don't know, but I'm going to be there at the finish line to watch.
I have no doubt you are. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to say, particularly in regards to the theme of the show, which is really about truing up to who you really are, to your greatest self?
Yeah, well, everybody's got their greatest self inside them. It'll be buried under a lot of lies, and there's nothing wrong with anybody for believing those lies. If you believe that your medicine has to be poison, you're actually working as designed, because this part of the brain that formulates your behavior outside your conscious awareness based on repetitive content, it's there to protect you. And it did protect you for millions of years up until this point. It's just that the people ruling us know that, hey, let's manipulate the repetitive content. We can make them believe anything. We can make them believe in opposites or inversions. So if you believe in inversions, there's nothing wrong with you. You're actually working as you're designed to work. But if you want to know how many inversions are you living out? Do you carry a couple in a little vial, or do you carry like a big Santa bag around with you? Well, you can know by how much pain you're in. Because don't forget, lies cause pain. Like if you think you can fly, which is a lie, but you could think it, and you walk out a 4-story balcony and jump off, you're going to get pain. And that's how the universe says, you're living a lie. Now, if you think a hot stove element that's red will cool your hand or protect it, that's a lie. But you can put your hand on, it'll burn it, and the pain is there to say, you know what? You're living a lie. So the more pain you're in, the more lies you carry in that sandbag. And you're going to have to go through those lies one at a time. They would have been inserted into you through the media and government policy in the exact way I've already described. And you're going to have to shut down any reinforcing repetition that fortifies those lies. And you have to upregulate the truth, and you'll deal with one lie at a time. And the healthier, and that takes a lot of energy. What I just described takes a lot of energy. You're not going to get it from coffee, booze, Doritos, or takeout, because your system will just collapse. You got to be a high-powered human, really strong. So if you want to know how to be really healthy so that you understand where you're going to get this energy to make these changes, there's only one book that can do it. And it's not my book. It's this guy called Paul Chek, Chek. His book is How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. And then if you read that, maybe that's your first step. Build your energy up. Get your prefrontal cortex or your frontal lobe back online so your brain is, the way God designed it to be. And then start making the changes, and you'll find it less draining. And then when your friends attack you and you're more of a powerhouse, it won't impact you as much. Because if the group gangs up on me, I'm set, right? Like, I'm physically strong, financially strong, spiritually strong. I'm intellectually strong. The group's not going to sway me. And basically, you can be so strong, like no one tries to sway me. They're like, he's too smart. We're not going to pressure him to do anything. My reputation arrives in a room way before I get there. And people can have that as well. But you got to start walking the walk everywhere you go. So get your strength up in the physical dimension and be healthy, read the book, and then this journey becomes so much easier. So start with Paul Chek's book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. Get on my email system and email me at info@jchristoff.com. And then we'll walk up the mountain together. I'll help you up a couple rungs up the ladder when you need help, but you got to walk it yourself. Basically, you're going to have to face some pain, some failure, and some discomfort in your life in order to morph to a super empowered, fully matured adult.
I call that spiritual hormesis.
I like that word.
Yeah.
Sounds very scientific.
Doesn't it just?
Absolutely.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
I don't know about that, but you got to be strong to deal with what's trying to kill you. Maybe that's a better phrase.
I'm so grateful to you. There was one last thing I wanted to say, and I forgot what it was, because I know
it's hard to keep track of the questions, right, or the observations.
It's true, because I was just so engrossed in what you were saying. So I want to thank you for everything you're doing. I'm so delighted that I found you.
I'm happy you're with us on the mountain with us, and we're climbing together. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, I remember. This is the last thing I want to say.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it really underscores what you were saying, because what's great about what you're saying is, among many things, is that you start with yourself, which is the easiest place to start, which you have complete control over, but also it's like you're helping yourself. It's not like you have to be a martyr. You don't have to do something outside of your self-interest. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The more self-interested, the more you take care of yourself, the more you can see, the more others will see around you, the more you can make a difference.
Yeah, you don't have to go out and hunt down people like, Schwab or Trudeau. And I'm like, no, you don't. Why don't you just go to your own fridge and say, look, that shouldn't be in there. Open your cupboard and saying, is it easier to go after Schwab, or is it easier to me to deal with the chips that are in my cupboard that I bought? I'm poisoning myself by my own hand. Maybe, just maybe, I should be dealing with my own self-destructive behavior inside the walls of my house. And that's where it starts. And if everybody did that, no bully, no psychic manipulator is going to enter our realm and push us around or manipulate us, because we're going to be too strong for them to do that.
Those are great last words. Thank you so much, Jason.
You're welcome. I hope, thanks for giving the opportunity to speak to the audience, Michelle. Thank you.
My pleasure. The personal is universal. I've always understood that to mean that what is deeply true for one person is deeply true for many, if not all of us. I wrote and performed a one-woman show many years ago. It was excruciatingly personal, sometimes painful, and sometimes pretty funny. After a performance, women would come up to me and tell me that I told their story. The details may have been different, but the core experience of life was the same. This, I now understand, is why mind control works so well. As much as we have unique expressions of our humanity, human beings are fundamentally the same. Being aware of that fact, being aware of our basic needs and desires, and being aware of how the knowledge of these things is used against us is the first step to loosening the grip of the manipulation we're continuously subjected to. This is my first takeaway from my fascinating conversation with Jason Christoff. Just knowing where and how we're being sabotaged shines a light on dark forces, even our own. Just knowing that we have a subconscious need to fit in with the herd is enough to alter our behavior, to align with what matters to us rather than what matters to the mob, to the governments, or to social engineers. My second major takeaway, which I'm exploring more deeply in Jason's coaching course, is the possibility and potential of being an adult in every area of life. It may sound obvious, but we can all identify places where we're being childish. Hint, anywhere we don't want to take full responsibility. I see it in myself when it comes to business. I'm an artist. I don't want to deal with a plan or finances. I want to create. There's a lot of opportunity to grow up there. The third major takeaway, because there are dozens of minor ones, is that we can begin to transform the world by transforming ourselves. Ensuring we are living healthy lives with clear heads is a great start to seeing what is happening in our world. And as we know, recognizing a problem is the first step to resolving it. Jason has inspired me to keep raising the bar on my own health and habits. One simple thing I'm doing is supporting smaller businesses making healthy personal care and other everyday items. As Jason said, we can't live our best lives when we're using our mouths as trash compactors or bathing in a toxic soup of big-name household products. As I wrap up the final show of Season 1, I'm asking you to make the switch with me. Make your health and the health of your family your number one priority, and help keep TruedUp online. When you participate in the Switchaway Initiative, this show gains financial support, and the producers of toxic products lose it. So it's a win-win. You can even make extra money by participating as part of the TruedUp team. Just email me at michelle@gatheryourwits.com to find out more. In the meantime, I will continue my Christoff coaching certification so that I can raise my own bar and so that I can offer support to others. Thank you for allowing me and my guests to contribute something to your life. Thank you for being the change. In the words of another coach from my favorite early 2000s show, Friday Night Lights, clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. Stay tuned for Season 2. Be true to yourself. And remember that we are the ones we've been waiting for.